This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
I want to welcome you back to Real Talk. If you're one of our regulars, and if this is your first time catching the show, welcome. This is where we debate ideas. This is where we hear different people out. This is where we come at issues, sometimes divisive, polarizing, emotional issues from different angles. And we hear different people's personal experiences, and then we make up our minds from there. We make informed decisions about how we feel about the things happening around us, including political policy, including environmental or conservation policy. That's what we're talking about in this episode. In just a second, we're going to talk to Mark Hall. Mark is the director of Blood Origins Canada. Their mission is to foster informed debate when it comes to hunting across the country. Mark is the host of a popular podcast, the Hunter Conservationist Podcast, and he's in support of what the Alberta government has done regarding changes to the Wildlife Act that'll allow private citizens, licensed hunters, to help conservation officers, ostensibly to help the province deal with what they deem to be problem grizzly bears. If you're a regular to the show, you've already heard us talk about this, at least from one angle, one side of the coin, with conservation photographer and grizzly lover John E. Marriott, and then Dr. Sarah L. Maligi. She's a bear biologist. She also happens to be the MLA for Banff Kananaskis. Where if you didn't catch that episode, as we talk to Mark, we're going to bring you highlights from that episode, get him to respond. Ultimately, our mission is that we better understand what this is all about and whether or not an argument can be made for the approach that the Alberta government is taking. That conversation starts in 30 seconds, but first I want to let listeners, viewers, audience members across the country know about a new designation program for financial advisors and senior finance professionals that are interested in digital assets and decentralized finance. This designation is the CDAA, that's Certified Digital Asset Advisor. You know, if you're paying attention to the news, that cryptocurrency is set to change Canadians' investments and private wealth. 75% of the new generation investors say that they're interested in adding digital assets to their financial portfolios. This program, this designation, will help advisors build a stable foundation. You're going to future-proof your own career here. And they're leading the way for financial professionals in Canada at Business Career College. You can learn more about this. That's the CDAA, Certified Digital Asset Advisor Designation Program at businesscareercollege.com. If you use the promo code Ryan20 when you sign up, they're going to knock 20% off that discount exclusive to Real Talk listeners. That's Ryan20 when you sign up today at businesscareercollege.com. As mentioned, Mark Hall is the director of the Blood Origins Canada Foundation. He's the host of the award-winning Hunter Conservationist Podcast, and he's making his Real Talk debut today. Mark, thanks for making time for us, and welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
Hey, thanks. It's an honor to be here. You really get going early in the morning. I don't get my talk show host voice until the evening.
Yeah, I guess I when I have a hunter complimenting me for getting up early in the morning, that sort of feels like an extra pat in the back. You look like you're joining us from a studio setting. What's your deal? You spend most of your time obviously in the realm or the world of hunting, sometimes obviously out in the field doing what you love, and a lot of times obviously working to educate the public and foster the types of conversations we're going to have today.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my studio here, and I'm in British Columbia. This is where I do my podcasting and videos and stuff from. And yeah, we primarily operate in the digital space, in reaching people with information about hunting and broader issues about wildlife management and conservation, and the broad spectrum of those. Sometimes we get into things like fisheries and the collapse of the cod stocks and marine ecosystems and seals and all sorts of things like that. And sort of we have two parts to our mission. One, we want to get back the narrative of hunting worldwide and specifically for me in Canada, so that people are hearing what's in a hunter's heart, who hunters are, what hunting is from hunters. So we're trying to, control that narrative, or at least present our side. And then our job is also to do exactly what you said at the beginning, to put information together, facts, evidence, present, the spectrum of ideas around topics to do with conservation and hunting, and then put that out to folks in the digital space so that they can at least be informed, have an understanding of the full spectrum of things that are around an issue. And people are smart. And I think when you give them the facts and the information, they make up their own minds.
You, on July 28th, you published a special episode of your podcast, and I recommend people check it out. It's called Alberta's Grizzly Debate. It's you kind of waxing for about 20 minutes. Just giving your take on it. And obviously we're going to get into that and why you actually think that it's a good idea. But there's a plea at the end that I really appreciated, as a matter of fact. You talk in the same calm and measured tone that you're talking to us in right now, and you ask people to pay attention to the facts and to focus on evidence and to not make their minds up based solely on emotion. How would you characterize the public? I mean, I'm asking you to really paint 35 million Canadians with one brush here, but how would you characterize public opinion and public discourse on hunting and hunters right now in Canada?
I think Canada is fairly balanced right now. When we look around the world, the United States is becoming more and more divisive on this topic. And of course, anything to do with hunting and the hunting conservation model in Africa is incredibly divisive worldwide. But we do see some of that spilling over into Canada, especially with high profile species like grizzly bears, those sorts of things. And it rubs off. It rubs off on Canadians. We are, a little bit slow in coming up to speed with the latest of things that are going on in the world. But we are seeing more and more polarized conversations, divisive conversations in politics and hunting and conservation, of you're either on this side or that side. And we're trying to operate in this gray space in the middle for a more nuanced conversation.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When you talk about the African conservation model, I'm one of those, to full disclosure, cards on the table, that has a real problem with seeing somebody take down like this beautiful lion, or down comes a giraffe, or somebody walks up and takes down an elephant, and I go, geez, and I know people can talk about that, and you're not here to talk about that. Maybe we will later. I want to get to grizzlies first, but I am making a point with all of this, and that's that I think a lot of people view hunting to be separated into two camps almost. There's trophy hunting and there's hunting for sustenance. And I bet you that there's a bunch of people that have absolutely no problem with a hunter. And obviously, I'm sure you and I will probably talk about cultural implications and historic implications. And I just interviewed Jordan Tutu a few weeks ago and heard him talk about him and his family's whaling traditions. And it's absolutely remarkable. It's actually an amazing story and an amazing tradition of survival up in that part of the country. But people will feel differently about somebody taking a white-tailed deer or an elk or a moose to feed their family, and somebody hunting a grizzly bear, right? Would you agree that a lot of people see those as two different conversations?
I think people do see it differently because of the narrative that's been painted about that, and the label that's been put on hunting, trophy hunting. We use a lot of descriptive terms to talk about hunting, recreational hunting, sport hunting, trophy hunting, sustenance hunting, all of these different words. At the end of the day, for me, hunting is just hunting, and the motive of the hunter can be different. How animals are utilized can be different. And I think one of the misconceptions about bear hunting, in general, that's the heart of the conversation here, is that hunters aren't interested in hunting bears from a sustenance perspective. The North American black bear is really no different than a white-tailed deer. The vast majority of hunters are simply hunting for meat, and they utilize the animal, they utilize the fur. I have a black bear robe that's actually a blanket that I throw on top of me when I go camping. It adds some extra warmth. And I think that's part of the ethos of hunting is like this idea of full utilization, making bone broth from the bones. And grizzly bears are really, no different. People in Alaska hunt grizzly bears for food. We have food social ceremonial hunting of grizzly bears by indigenous peoples in Canada, the polar bear in the Arctic, as well. So again, it's not an either this or a that, trophy hunting or sustenance hunting. It's a blend of all things. And in the history of hunting, animals were hunted by people for different purposes. They utilized animals for food, for sustenance, but they also used materials from them for everything from whale bones to build structures, to the leather and the hides were turned into textiles for clothing and shelter. So it's just part of the history of hunting, where hunting fits into to human civilization in how animals are utilized.
Well, I want to give a shout out to Luke in Diamond Valley. He's a Real Talk listener. He's the one that reached out and said, if you're going to have a fulsome and informed conversation, explore different perspectives on this, he said, you've got to get in touch with Mark. And we appreciate when audience members let us know who they'd love to hear.
Absolutely.
On the
Thanks,
podcast.
Luke.
Yeah, of course. Luke in beautiful Diamond Valley. So Mark, you're coming to us from BC. We're talking about Alberta's wildlife management, in particular the grizzly bear. If you're talking about BC and you're talking about Alberta, two pretty different stories when it comes to grizzly populations. And while right now wildlife management policy might be somewhat similar in BC and Alberta, it hasn't always been that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're different conversations, I think for a couple of points. One, British Columbia has a very large grizzly population. It may be upwards in the order of like 16,000 bears. In Alberta, we're talking plus minus of 1,000 bears. The hunt was the general hunt in Alberta was stopped, I believe it was 2006. In BC, it was 2017, right around 2016-17 when that decision was brought in. But I think that's where kind of it ends. BC and Alberta took very divergent paths after they put a moratorium on hunting, in my opinion. Alberta continued on the path of investing in science. British Columbia basically stopped all government-led science after the hunt was stopped. So we have no more government-led population-level science that's going on in British Columbia, staying on the pulse of what grizzly bear populations are doing, what the health of the populations are, what the health of the animals are. Alberta continued to invest in that. And BC lost most of their government grizzly bear experts. They did not replace them. Alberta is still got grizzly bear experts. They still work with scientists at the universities. So the ethos, the philosophy about grizzly bear conservation, in my opinion, went in two different directions in both of these provinces post-hunting closure.
So Mark, what's your? It's been interesting. Like we reached out to a number of different expert guests over the course of the last few weeks, and you're one of them, obviously. But there were several hunting commentators or prominent voices on hunting in the country that declined interview requests because they said that they weren't exactly sure the crystal clear details of Alberta's changes to the grizzly bear conflict resolution plan. And I think a lot of people feel like it's a bit of an explosive subject right now. They don't want to step in one. They don't want to say the wrong thing. What's your impression or what's your understanding of the implication of the changes? I think most people see it in plain language as private hunters will get tapped on the shoulder or can procure a tag to go hunt a grizzly deemed to be a problem bear. In other words, it's interacted with livestock or property or humans, whereas in prior or previous circumstances, that would be a wildlife conservation officer instead.
Right. I think like to kick that off, that's part of the problem that I see from my perspective of the public trying to figure out what is going on in Alberta is because basically the word grizzly bear and the word hunting popped up and things just went crazy. And all of these different narratives and sides and opinions and different angles were brought in. Things that had nothing to do with this change were brought in, and it just turned into this huge chaotic tornado. And people that aren't close to this were like, what's going on? What's the truth? I don't understand it. And so that's been my job. My job is to kind of cut into the heart of this matter and find out what's going on. And basically, I think it's a relatively simple decision. Alberta has a science-based grizzly bear conflict management plan. It ties to the recovery plan in the areas that are identified for grizzly bear management. The recovery plan identifies a core area for grizzly bear recovery, prime habitat, the recovery area, a support zone where grizzly bears may ebb in and out of the core habitat into lower elevation, which is where they're starting to come in contact with rural homes, rural communities, and then basically areas outside non-traditional grizzly bear habitat, at least in the modern era where grizzly bears may show up. And the conflict plan brings in aspects of grizzly bear conservation, which is when you're trying to recover a population, you want to protect your females, particularly your adult breeding females and juvenile females that need to be able to reproduce at some point in the future. Otherwise, your population is either stable or declining. So the conflict management plan identifies triggers of when a grizzly bear has exhibited a pattern of conflict behavior that needs to be dealt with so that it doesn't lead to more impacts, more losses, or a loss of human life or impacts to rural operators. And that decision matrix was created for each one of these management zones. That's what officers used to make their call in the field of when a bear needed to be killed. And now the change is simply asking hunters that are interested in helping the conservation officer service to put their name into a pool. They'll be drawn, and then if the conservation officers need help or assistance to, locate a bear that may take way too long for them to invest their time in, they're going to ask licensed hunters in the province to assist in removing a specific individual animal that's been identified by the experts as needing to be removed.
Mark, can you and I both agree, though, that it's not just altruism? It's not just a private hunter's desire to help conservation officers, that it'd be a pretty plumb and appealing opportunity for a lot of people to have a shot at a grizzly bear?
Well, I think that's part of the narrative where I don't quite, subscribe to that. So under the conflict management plan, under the decision matrices, it is very possible, and it's probably probable that most of the bears that are going to be identified as conflict bears slated for lethal removal are not going to be big prime male grizzly bears, which is what a hunter under a regulated hunt would be wanting to go after. That's one of the concepts in sustainable hunting and grizzly bear management, is the removal of large old males. They have virtually no impact on population dynamics, trajectories, by removing old males. And that's part of the adventure for a hunter that's hunting a grizzly bear is that large animal. In this case, a wildlife officer might assign a subadult male that's been systematically causing a whole bunch of problems. I mean, so that's not a quote unquote a trophy for a hunter. It's not something that a hunter would willingly choose if they had a grizzly bear tag and they headed off into the mountains. They're going to glass and pass over bears and continuously look for a large older male because that's sustainable in grizzly bear hunting. And, there may be hunters that sort of see an opportunity that they might, be assigned a problem grizzly bear that would be something that they might want to hunt if that was an opportunity. I'm not going to say that that doesn't exist in people's motives for participating, But, one of the things about what's in the heart of a hunter is hunters have always been involved in wildlife management, involved in conservation all over the world. And in Canada and the United States, one of the things that's very near and dear to hunters is our law enforcement agencies, because they're out there catching the people that are breaking the law, and there's zero tolerance for that in the hunting community. But when you take conservation officers and their time is tied to nuisance calls with bears, setting traps, checking traps, writing hazard abatement orders for property owners, investigating problem bears that have broken into chicken coops, all this kind of stuff. It takes away their time from being in the field, preempting, a poacher or someone breaking the law or polluting or something. And so hunters getting involved in something like this, I would think there's going to be a portion of the hunters that are like, yeah, let's keep the conservation officers out there, focused on catching people breaking the law and not spending weeks and hours and, nighttime sits and stuff looking for a problem grizzly bear.
We're talking to Mark Hall, who's the director at Blood Origins Canada. You can check him out at bloodorigins.org, also the host of the Hunter Conservationist podcast. If you're listening to us live streaming on the Mixler audio app presented by California Closets, or on YouTube, you can always chime into our live chat as well. And we've got some healthy commentary there, Mark, to be sure. But I told you I wanted to put some clips in front of you, some comments that have been made previously on the show, and give you a chance to respond to it. John E. Marriott is easily one of the most recognizable and well-followed photographers in Canada. He's a wildlife photographer. He's an outspoken conservationist himself. We talked to him on July 10th, and he basically said Alberta's rewinding the clock by a century. Here's what John had to say.
It's like we've stepped back into the early 1900s or something, and suddenly everybody's supposed to be arming themselves with guns, and we're going out there and we're killing all these problem bears that are trying to kill us all. And it's just some ridiculous rhetoric that I just simply don't agree with. And I think the majority of Albertans can really see through this and see that all that Minister Lowen is really doing is he's providing opportunities for his cronies to get out there and kill some grizzly bears, which they've been wanting to do for decades now.
That was John E. Marriott, wildlife photographer, on July 10th. Mark, what would you say in response?
John's an amazing photographer, and he absolutely loves wildlife. He brings a lot of passion and heart to his advocacy work. I've known John for a long time. What he said there was kind of classic John. A topic comes up and he becomes very emotional. His go-to kind of arguments is accusations against the credibility of other people. He's kind of a kick the door in, guns a-blazing type advocate for conservation, and he focuses heavily on attacking people, disenfranchising people, making especially hunters look like these corrupt, immoral, people, when in fact they're just like your neighbor, they're citizens in the province. I've heard that accusation that Minister Lowen just did this so that he can advocate to his friends or give his friends tags to go trophy hunt grizzly bears. So my response to that is, where's the proof? Where's the evidence? You're making a libelous statement against a public figure, a politician, that he made a decision and is going to act in a corrupt manner, not in the public interest. So where's the proof of that? It's basically a conspiracy theory. And I think, conspiracy theories are interesting. They're engaging. They're a great way to get attention. But at the end of the day, if you don't have evidence or proof to back that up, that's the type of stuff I tend to disregard very early in educating myself about these topics.
Mark, hang tight for a second. When we come back, we've got a former Calgary City Councillor in the chat right now. Jeremy Farkas has a question about public safety. I'm curious to see how you'll take that one on. And then I want to put a comment from bear biologist and politician, NDP MLA, Dr. Sarah Almaligi, in front of you as well. We're talking to Mark Hall on a special edition of Real Talk that's happening with the support of Athabasca University. When we talk about deepening our knowledge, deepening our understanding of the world around us. For a lot of you, that's obviously going to come in the form of a post-secondary journey. And as we approach the fall, I'm sorry, I hate to say it, the leaves are going to start changing soon. The temperatures are going to start dropping soon. A lot of people are going to be thinking about Athabasca University because they've got a ton of advantages you don't find at your other brick and mortar post-secondaries. Your only commute is to your device, for starters. You can learn more about the AU Advantage, its programs and courses, and support for students, including financial aid and awards, by visiting them online today at athabascau.ca. At California Closets, they are in the business of organization. They're going to help you get decluttered, and it all starts with a free design consultation. You may be looking at some of their work. You look at their website, californiaclosets.ca, and you go, gosh, I could never afford something that beautiful. You might be surprised. They've got different levels that they can approach your design through, from the more practical, maybe a little more frugal, very efficient designs, all the way up to the luxury stuff where you're sparing no expense on your new dream home and that walk-in closet. You can learn more about the cost and how complexity and accessories and special features influence it by going to their website. A ton of resources there at californiaclosets.ca. And our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy are putting out the call. They've hung their sign. They're hiring in BC and Alberta, Kamloops, Lethbridge, Calgary, Edmonton. Kubi is looking to add team members. You can check out the careers link to see what they have available and learn more about this company that's providing the latest clean energy solutions for homes and businesses. Nobody's busier in Western Canada than Kubi Energy. We're talking to Mark Hall, who's the director of Blood Origins Canada, the host of the Hunter Conservationist podcast. We got Jeremy, as mentioned in the chat, Jeremy Farkas Mark, and he says, are there so many problem bears in Alberta that conservation officers are overloaded? And if so, wouldn't that suggest a deeper problem in terms of wildlife and human interactions? Maybe we need a policy and planning solution there. It does sort of give off the vibe. We're tapping hunters. We're asking private citizens to help out. I haven't seen the government use the words help out, but to step in and assist conservation officers, it would imply that we're understaffed. What would you say to Jeremy?
Well, I think what we need to do is to go back to the government's policy on the conflict management plan and look at what is actually deemed a problem grizzly bear. And it's interesting, but grizzly bears, when they start to cause problems or have negative interactions with people outside of an offensive, attack on humans, are given the benefit of the doubt. They have a tremendous amount of latitude in, they cause a problem, they're relocated, they cause a problem, they're relocated. They get a lot of chances to kind of go back to their natural behaviors. I don't think Alberta has a conflict problem. Like it's all of a sudden just got crazy. There has been some high-profile attacks in the last few years. This spring with some sheep. There's been a couple of tragic events with people. But on average, the data I've seen, the conservation officers are killing about 2 to 3 grizzly bears a year under this conflict scenario. Just to give you a scale, British Columbia is more on the order of magnitude of about 30 grizzly bears a year in the province that are killed under conflict management. So I don't think it's like all of a sudden there's this, explosion. Things have got out of control. I don't necessarily know what the staffing levels are, or they're understaffed. But what I do see in this whole picture is I think it takes a tremendous amount of time to catch a grizzly bear, conflict bear, whether it's setting a trap or having to sit and wait. And that uses up a lot of valuable time for a conservation officer. It's not a quick and easy thing to catch a problem grizzly bear in a lot of cases. So when problem grizzly bears arise, if conservation officers can't catch the bear, or they can't get out, or they're getting multiple calls, or their focus is going to places and telling people to clean up their properties, get rid of garbage, get rid of carcasses, they're going to be back the next day to follow up on that. They're tied up. And so what I see in the data in Alberta is a very high number of grizzly bears that are killed every year illegally. And I don't know exactly what's going on there, but there is this acronym out there in the world in Western North America known as SSS, shoot, shovel, and shut up. There is a point where people get frustrated with living next to these large, dangerous animals. And, the response is, electrify your chicken coop. The response is, here's an order to secure your garbage. Here's a response is, we're just going to monitor this bear in the valley and see what it does. That crosses people's thresholds. And I suspect, and I'm hypothesizing here, that there's a frustration level in rural Alberta where people are taking the matters into their own hands, and they're killing bears that are causing them problems. I don't think this is unrealistic for Canada because this is a pattern that we see all over the world, whether it's in India with leopards or tigers, or whether it's in rural Africa with lions or leopards. There is a point, regardless of laws, where people get so frustrated. They live under such duress of these big animals coming by and causing damage that they take matters into their own hands. So I think including citizens in this, just like the government has included citizens in its grizzly bear conservation app and in marking points where people see grizzly bears, including citizens in wildlife management, I think is a good thing. And it has the potential to help grizzly bear conservation in the sense that people feel like people are involved, including licensed hunters as part of the tool to assist in lethal removal of identified bears. The public is going to see that as like, hey, they're listening to us. We're part of the solution now. And that may somewhere along the line cause some individuals to hold off on doing something illegal.
Yeah, I have no doubt the shoot, shovel, shut up thing is that nobody made that more famous than former Premier Ralph Klein talking about BSE, of course. But and I think that just reiterates as well, and some of the feedback that we've got after our July 10th episode, some of the feedback in our live chat, people living in rural scenarios, ranchers, ag producers are going to have a different perspective on this. A lot of people that see grizzlies on their proper cougars or wolves or coyotes or whatever you're talking about, they're going to see this issue differently than somebody, doing a podcast from a downtown tower in the middle of a city center. And I acknowledge that. That's obvious. Do you have 3 more minutes? I want to put something in front of you.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. This is because now we're talking about now human and bear interaction. I mean, really, it's human and livestock interaction with bears that's prompting this entire conversation. That's why we're talking about this. And Dr. Sarah Elmaligi, we talked to her on the July 10th episode as well. She's a bear biologist. And more recently, she was elected as the MLA for Banff Kananaskis, currently in opposition with the NDP. So we talked to her about this, and she focused. 15 years of her career she's spent on studying bears. And she talked to us about that human-bear intersection. Here's a snippet.
Of course, it's always really, really tragic anytime somebody is hurt or killed by a bear, whether that's a grizzly bear or a black bear. But, our relationship with bears goes way, way back, like to the 1800s or even further. Indigenous people have relationships with bears on this landscape since time immemorial, right? And, for us, a lot of that relationship can be based on fear. And so when we talk about coexistence with bears or our relationship with bears, and this is why I wrote the book, there's always the bear's perspective, but the human perspective is equally as important, because if we're reacting from a place of fear, we may be more quickly to land on aggressive management options. But if we can take a step back and react from a place of trying to understand the bear's behavior, we might see that other management options could also be effective. So I think grizzly bears have a really hard time making a go of it on the Alberta landscape. There's a lot of reasons for human-caused mortality, whether you're talking about highway mortality or train mortality. We also do a lot of things on the landscape. We alter grizzly bear habitat in a lot of ways, and that can also lead to mortality of grizzly bears. So poaching deeper and deeper into the backcountry, for example. And then, of course, there are the odd occasion where a grizzly bear has engaged in really damaging conflict behavior. So that could be, harming a person or, killing a bunch of livestock like we saw with sheep earlier this year. And in those rare instances, Fish and Wildlife officers do euthanize individual bears. But as John said, that's really on average 2 to 3 bears a year. So it's not creating this like crazy onerous capacity issue for Fish and Wildlife staff that they need the public's help to start managing and euthanizing bears on the landscape.
Obviously, she's not convinced that this is the right move. What do you make of what she brought to the table there, Mark?
I agree with Sarah. I think a lot of things she said are true. I can subscribe to that. What I think is the system in Alberta already embraces these things. So when you go to the grizzly bear conflict management plan in Alberta, the priority for officers making decisions what to do with conflict calls is prevention and mitigation. So the first response is officers are going to rural properties to find out what's causing the conflict. Is it unsecured garbage? Is it access to food? Is it a deceased cow that was been left on whatever it is? And they're going to work to try to resolve, have a peaceful resolution to that. So conflict mitigation prioritizes prevention, in my opinion, in Alberta. So that embraces what she said. Yes, 2 to 3 problem bears a year basically cross the line where everybody's like, okay, relocation, rehabilitation, securing a trap, all these mitigation actions are not working. This bear now becomes a high risk of either killing some livestock or a human, and they're going to take proactive measures to prevent those things from happening. There doesn't seem to be disagreement about that. The scale of it is 2 to 3 bears a year. Where I have a little difference in opinion with Sarah is she talks about, yes, there is a fear that's out there, and a fear drives killing. 100 years ago, yes, people that arrived on the continent were fearful of grizzly bears, and there was wanton killing. You just saw a grizzly bear, you killed it. Didn't matter what it was doing. It was out of fear. But to disregard that as being a valid human concern, I think is not the right approach in conservation or science. There was a study done in Alberta, I think in 2021, of the attitudes and frustrations of rural people, and fear is real. Fear of losing animals. Imagine if you're a livestock owner and you've calved and you got to go to bed that night wondering if these little baby sheep or cows that you care about are going to be alive in the morning. That's a stress. That's a fear that these people live with. And I think we have to acknowledge that, and to know that people being scared is part of it. This is where I think including citizens directly in wildlife management, and that's in the development of policy and in the implementation of policy in the field, actually giving some of the responsibilities to people for the management, can get us past that human nature of being scared and then killing a bear and burying it somewhere in the woods. To me, that is the single biggest thing why I am supportive of the direction that Alberta has taken, because I think this is a science-based thing, social science-based thing, that there is what I perceive to be a high level of illegal killing of grizzly bears in Alberta that's due to frustration, fears, and stress of people that are living close to these, where including people, the lethal removal of identified problem bears has a really good chance of maybe bringing down those illegal kills, because it's bringing people's social tolerance up, that they're not being marginalized or left out of grizzly bear management. And, come to me in 2 years from now and show me that the numbers have gotten worse with illegal kills. I'd be happy to reevaluate the whole approach in Alberta. But to me, I think it's worth trying, because at the end of the day, grizzly bears are dying for wanton killing reasons in Alberta. And from a conservation perspective, that concerns me, because that has the potential to impact recovery and sustainable populations. And yeah, it's a tough place to live in Alberta, like Sarah said, for a grizzly bear. So anything we can do in adaptive management, in science, and let's put scientists on this and start to monitor, take the pulse of people, see what's happening in response to this. And if there is a positive outcome for grizzly bears, being fewer deaths, fewer illegal deaths, then I would consider this to be a conservation success, a case study in Alberta worthy of maybe looking at implementing in other places like BC.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think, like you said, time will tell on this. It'll be interesting to see over the next couple of years how this ages, how it plays out. Were there to be hypothetically a change in government, you wonder if this is something that another government might reverse. It's obviously something like, isn't this interesting? And you got to be careful when you're talking about political policy. You sort of go, oh, there's only like a small group of people affected, or there's only a small group of animals affected. It kind of sounds like you have selective empathy, but this is a scenario where if Dr. El-Maliki, the MLA, is saying, there might be 2 or 3 problem grizzlies a year euthanized. If you're talking about like 2 or 3 bears, if we were talking about 2 or 3 coyotes, if we were talking about 2 or 3 magpies, or 2 or 3, I'm trying to think of like invasive urban species, animals that people just quite frankly don't care about, nobody would care. But there is something, isn't there, about the grizzly bear? Like there's just something about it, and there's other examples around the world. Like an elephant's another example, a lion's another example, a bald eagle's another example. As humans, we kind of view different species differently, and so it may only take an example involving one grizzly bear to really sway public opinion in either direction. And like you said, fear goes a long way into it as well. Politicians, sometimes their job is to assuage people's fears, and sometimes they can be accused of stoking people's fears. You could say the same thing about talk show hosts, but in the rare circumstance where there is a human grizzly interaction that goes sideways, and it does happen, rarely, but it does happen, then something like that can also influence public opinion. This is something we got to crack down on. This is something we got to be more aware of. But this is obviously a conversation probably more prominent in Alberta now than it has been in a really, really long time, safe to say. And I'm grateful that you've joined us to talk about it. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you very much.
You got it. Mark Hall is the director at Blood Origins Canada. You can check him out online at bloodorigins.org. And, of course, we'll link to that in the show notes on the podcast on YouTube. Mark's also the host of the Hunter Conservationist podcast. And I encourage you to check that out. He did a 20-minute episode right around the end of July. I think it was the 28th of July, talking about this. I have not heard that he makes an interesting argument. I guarantee that he's right, that in some circumstances, and I'm not just talking about grizzlies, but I wouldn't eliminate them from this conversation, that there are circumstances where people are shooting, shoveling, and shutting up, where they're going to deal with the problem themselves, and that's it. Yeah. I saw one of our audience members, I can't remember who it was, I apologize, saying that their livestock that they keep, I think it may have been M8, said, coyotes are the bigger issue, or their livestock get a little more skittish around coyotes than anything else. Coyotes seem to be another animal that people don't care about quite as much, which has always interested me. People's approach to coyotes in rural areas, they look almost identical to dogs, but people view coyotes and dogs very differently.
Yeah, of course.
But I've not heard the provincial government. I've not heard Minister Todd Loewen or the Premier suggesting that this is in response to an increase in the triple S approach to people illegally killing bears. But Mark may be onto something there. He may be right. Yeah. We do know that there are issues with grizzlies interacting with people's livestock, with people's livelihood, for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Sure, yeah. And Mark, he seems like a thoughtful guy, intelligent.
For sure.
There's when you think of hunters, I know there's some who are, not legitimate, who are, out there being cowboys. Mark doesn't seem like one of them.
No.
But this whole thing, even he said it, 3 problem bears in Alberta, 30 in BC. That doesn't really sound like a problem to me that you need to give more rights to hunters. That sounds like hire 2 more wildlife agents, or, you know what I mean? And I don't know. To bears, we're the invasive species, right? If you're living in bear country, I think you should adapt to their kind of lifestyle, not the other way around. Do I think, it's tragedy when like kids, humans, livestock, get attacked by bears. But even Mark, the problem doesn't seem as big as everyone's making it out to be, that we need to, empower hunters to get out there and police the forest. It seems like a lot of overreach here.
Yeah, I just appreciate him showing up, and he is a thoughtful guy.
Sure.
He is an informed guy. So I saw somebody that said, well, what are this guy's credentials?
I wish all hunters were like Mark.
Yeah. But listen, and I'll say this, we were at the family farm just last week in beautiful, shout out to Middle Lake, Saskatchewan, just east of Humboldt. And I married into a hunting family, and we enjoyed elk smokies and moose steaks. And at my wife's brother's, at my brother-in-law and his beautiful bride's wedding, among the fare that they served was bear burgers. I've tried it. So I know that, and there are a ton of hunters, Mark's absolutely correct, that are some of the biggest supporters and practitioners of wildlife conservation around. And for a lot of hunters, I think that it's reputation management as well. I see a parallel here, not exactly, but work with me here on my parallel. We're a family of enthusiastic off-roaders, right? And we've all got the big Jeeps that we take out, and we love getting out into the wilderness and taking those trails on. But there are huge optics issues with people that are enthusiasts of that sport, and we know that. People that are ripping through riparian zones and destroying habitat and leaving smoldering messes behind on crown land, and it takes a little bit more personally and takes a little bit more seriously. We're a little bit more diligent in ensuring that people understand that it is possible. I've always said this to my friends. It is possible to be someone that's enthusiastic about hiking and off-roading trails at different times in your summer. The same person can do both activities. And I think that hunters probably, feel oftentimes like they're not being properly represented or accurately represented in these types of conversations when people start talking about poachers and hunters that are just looking to blow animals away and kill to satiate their bloodlust. I don't think that's the case for most hunters. As a matter of fact, I know it's not.
Well, I did laugh at the website, though, Blood Origins, but I'll move on from that. Mark, I thought was a great guest. Again, very intelligent. I thought he was very thoughtful. He doesn't seem like one of those hunters we're worried about. But another thing, and people are saying this in the chat as well, like the grizzlies are at-risk animals. We're not talking about, you said, magpies. We're not talking about wild boars. We're not talking about coyotes. We're talking about a species of animal that we're trying to protect. So this whole thing, and I think Mark, if we had a round table, Mark's the guy to get in there. And I think he made good points. But at the end of the day, even he said 3 bears in Alberta that they had to get rid of, 30 in BC. This doesn't sound like a quote problem at all. Yeah,
and the Senate, this, maybe this translates into, I hope, some of you are going to laugh. Some of you are going to go, aha! You're going to scoff when I say that I hope that there's transparency here. Whether it comes by way of a journalist with a FOIP request or otherwise. But I hope that there's transparency a year from now or 2 years from now on how many of these scenarios have played out.
Sure.
Right? How many private hunters were given licenses or whatever they call them, tags, however they're going to characterize it. But we're given the green light to go hunt a so-called problem grizzly. And the cynic in me, the part of me that used to be a journalist, everyone, before I was a talk show host, the part of me that used to be an unbiased journalist would ask, and this is a question that we asked on our July 10th episode. It's a question that's being asked in our live chat this morning, and that is, what deems a bear to be a problem bear? Who makes the decision? And is it safe to assume that in a scenario where problem bears can now be hunted by private citizens, that we may have more complaints about bears in order to deem more bears to be problem bears and create more hunting opportunities? That's the cynic in me, but I think that that's a fair and obvious question that we have to ask. We don't know the answer yet because it hasn't happened yet.
You're totally right. So say that's the scenario. You're living in one of these places where, some people in the chat have said, hey, we see a bear every now and then on the farm, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, these new rights to hunters being empowered to go out. Now, all of a sudden, maybe in your head, you're like, that bear is annoying. Maybe I'll just get rid of it, kind of thing. Whereas before, you were just, putting your garbage away a little more safely and keeping your animals, locked up a little better. So I agree with you totally. I think this is going to, people are going to come out of the woodwork being like, this is a problem bear. Why? Well, it ate my garbage one day. Is that really a problem bear, or is that like a problem bear to me when you say that is something that's dangerous? You know
well, a problem bear to me is like a bear that's frequenting like, the Spray Lakes campground,
sure,
and it won't leave the hikers alone.
Exactly.
And we're concerned that there's going to be an attack because, some idiot visitors, left a bunch of food out on the picnic table, and now the bears become food accustomed. And, that's a situation we might be talking about. Did I tell you about the conversation with Jordan Tutu? This guy is just one of my favorite Canadians. This guy's just an unbelievable guy. And Adam Scorgie, the filmmaker, is getting set to release his new film Tutu that tells the story of Jordan, and part of that endeavors to find out what makes him tick. Jordan Tutu is one of the fiercest hitters in hockey history, a Canadian World Junior superstar, a legend you might call him, a fan favorite down for the Nashville Predators when he played there and elsewhere, Detroit, in his hockey career, but just like a very likable guy. He's survived a lot. He grew up in a family where alcoholism was prevalent. He lost his brother to suicide. It's a remarkable story. Anyway, he's talking about his upbringing and how and why he's wired the way that he is. And he tells this story where, he's like, I grew up like in Nunavut, where he grew up in Rankin Inlet. Like he's like, I was out, like his family had the contract. There's some government buildings up there, some facilities, and his family had the contract to do snow clearing on these sidewalks. And he's like, that was my job. And he's like, I'm talking like -40, -50. I mean, this is some of the most extreme geography, some of the most extreme climate anywhere in Canada, anywhere on planet Earth. Like, there's not even trees in Rankin Inlet. It's just basic, like, it is a hardcore type scenario.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm like 12 years old before school. He's like, it's 4 a.m. and it's like -45. And I'm out there shoveling sidewalks in front of government buildings, and there are polar bears everywhere.
Wow.
He's like, it was a normal thing in his upbringing to be around and to see polar bears all the time. And it's an element of society. Obviously, there's a lot of tradition with those in those indigenous communities of understanding how to cohabitate and to live in those types of scenarios. But just really fascinating to hear somebody talk about the human bear interaction. In that case, I mean, what are polar bears? They got to be closer to 1,000 pounds. I think grizzlies are like 600, 700, 800.
Yeah.
Polar bears are obviously a lot bigger than that. But just a wild reality.
That'd be amazing
for Jordan
Tutu.
Tutu. Oh my god,
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for him, he's the first Inuk. I know now all of a sudden I'm turning this into Jordan Tutu hour.
But I've always said
the first
this.
to ever play for Team Canada, the first to ever play in the NHL.
Yeah.
The guy's just an absolute legend. Shout out Jordan Tutu.
I think we need more interaction with animals that is safe and that is like, understanding them. I used to advocate for zoos, but now zoos are kind of like falling the wayside. But, kids who grow up seeing animals, respecting them, seeing the beauty, they're going to grow up good kids, right?
Yeah.
People who grow up like being afraid because they see like pictures of bears growling with teeth, or hear that, they're attacking campers and stuff like that. And they've never, like we said yesterday, touched grass, actually seen one, never driven out to Elk Island and got, up alongside and out, not too close.
Don't get too close.
But you know what I mean? We definitely need more of that because we're so detached from nature.
David in our live chat says the argument Jespo just gave proved that it's up to humans. I think he's talking about my comment about leaving food out. He says proves that it's up to humans who are camping and fishing, etc., to change their behaviors. Personal responsibility when we go to the backcountry in Alberta will help. David, 100% agree. I'm not gonna disagree with that at all. Let us know what you think about this. Talk at ryanjespersen.com. Maybe your submission or your response to this would be a good fit for the flamethrower presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. It's the last show, the last episode of every week. Typically it's Fridays. We present the flamethrower. They're all real emails from real talkers that are all fired up to talk at ryanjespersen.com. We have some emails I want to get into, speaking of that, including one from Patrick, who is at the NOFX show that you and I were at.
Oh, yeah, nice.
On Sunday night. We've also got a follow-up from one of the strategists on my Bitcoin comments, which is really, really interesting. I want to get into this. And Fiona, who has a challenge for you, Johnny, in response to something that was said on this show about a week and a half ago. She's got a challenge for you. Folks, Johnny does not know what I'm talking about. He does not know what's coming. That's coming up. Plus,
and he hates challenges.
The Edmonton Elks might be changing their name again. They might be changing their name back to the Eskimos. We're going to get to that in just a second. You know what? Dollars to donuts? I think it might happen. No. But first, let me tell you about Friesen Brothers, because they've got 17 locations across the province of Alberta, and they're ready to welcome you. If you're going to be hosting family or friends and you're going to be barbecuing, you're going to want to make sure you check out their website, friesen.com. They've got a ton of recipes and amazing ideas for people that are looking to wow their loved ones with Alberta proteins. They've got bison, they've got beef, they've got pork, chicken, turkey, you name it. Let's get grilling at Friesen Brothers. You can also find an initiative on their website, that's friesen.com, how they're helping the displaced residents of Jasper, Alberta. You can check out what they're doing for the Jasper Volunteer Fire Brigade. Friesen Brothers matching donations up to $50,000. All funds will be given directly to the Jasper Volunteer Fire Brigade. We love to see it. Shout out to our friends at Friesen Brothers. Speaking of wildfire, Complete Care Restoration, they've got teams on the ground in Jasper. They're in the business of getting people's lives back, restoring properties, rebuilding peace of mind. If heaven forbid you individually or as a member of a community experience a disaster, could be fire, could be flood, maybe your home sustained some smoke damage, maybe you found black mold downstairs, whatever it is, leave it to the team of certified and diligent professionals at Complete Care Restoration, ready to respond 24/7. You can find them online at completecarerestoration.ca. So I told you about this rumor a while ago, and Dustin Nielsen, our buddy at Edmonton Sports Talk, put it on the record yesterday. So it's expected that Larry Thompson, who's a construction magnate, a very successful guy, very successful family, is going to be introduced as the new owner of the Edmonton Elks
this Thursday press
Thursday,
conference.
right?
Yeah.
And the rumor has been, the scuttlebutt has been for quite some time that there has been consideration made to change the name back to the Edmonton Eskimos, or potentially the Edmonton Esks, as opposed to the Edmonton Elks. We don't know. We'll probably find out soon. I do want to acknowledge you are the official DJ of the Edmonton Elks, and all of these conversations put you in a tough spot. But you're also
I don't make any assumptions.
You're also my co-pilot here on this show, and so I want to ask you how you feel about it. I already know how I feel about it, but how do you feel?
I love
you
the team before. I love the team now, and a big win the other day there on
2 in a row, dude.
Country Day.
Yeah.
They're not going to change the name back. Number one, that's too expensive to rebrand backwards after you just buy a team. Second of all, this is not the way of the world's going. I mean, the Cleveland Indians aren't going to go back to the Cleveland Indians. The Washington Redskins are going to go back. For us to do that would be the worst possible look in all of North American sports. For all of time, we would be looked at as the guys going backwards in time. It would just be... Will they call it Esks? I don't know. Maybe that's one letter, but still, man, you've got T-shirts, helmets, everything. The whole place is rebranded. You're going to go back? That's a hefty investment. And if he's got the money and he does that,
he does have the money.
Wow,
he does have the money. I mean, I'm not his accountant, but I would say money is not an issue in this circumstance.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's the point. I would say number one.
But dollars to cents. Come on.
The Edmonton Eskimos, when I moved to Edmonton in the mid-2000s, were drawing about 30,000 people a game, like 25 to 35,000 a game. If Saskatchewan was in town, there was way more.
Sure.
And now the Edmonton Elks are drawing like 8,000, 10,000 on a good, I don't know exactly, but there is an issue. I have a hard time believing that there's 20,000 fewer people at games because of the name change.
There isn't at
all. I don't buy that. I've never believed that. I do think that there are some fans, sour grapes, that probably were huge Eskimos fans that on principle canceled their season tickets and have not been back. But I think that you could measure those folks in the dozens or the hundreds, not the tens of thousands.
Yeah, and we're talking about wins. That's all it is. When a team has wins, you'll come out and see them. And there's young kids. They don't care what the name is. They don't give a crap. Elks, Esks, Elfs, they don't care. If the team is winning games, if they're winning Grey Cups, the seats will fill. This has nothing to do with names or images or logos. I can think of a bunch of hockey. Jeez, the Florida Panthers right there. We're talking about hockey in Florida, a horrible logo. I hate it. Seats are full. Why? Because they won all this year.
Yeah, Jerbacka says, leave it as the Elks, a grand and noble animal. The team just needs to win. Erica says, I heard that rumor as well about the Elks changing their name. The new owner hasn't even stepped in front of a microphone yet, and already people are saying he's going to change the name. Really? This is nothing but rumors. Erica's correct. It is rumors, but typically, let me tell you this, Real Talkers, when I'm bringing rumors to the table on the show and going on the record of them, they're typically rumors that are coming from a source that at least has some credibility, as opposed to just like my buddies at Wednesday Hockey. No offense, and shout out to the guys at Wednesday Hockey, but I want to make sure, like, if we're talking about rumors on the show, that there's some credibility behind them, that we're not just creating our own rumor mill. And I have been hearing from people that are, let's say, Elks adjacent. In other words, they're not in the organization, but they have experience or work with people in the organization that are saying that this is a very real possibility. I do agree with you. I think it's a tough look for Edmonton. I might even be surprised. I don't know how it works exactly, but I might even be surprised. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the CFL had something to say about that. But also, and here's where it gets a little bit murky and mucky, and I'm not trying to start fights here, but if you look at like what prompted that in the first place, they're the Eskimos at the time, led by then President Len Rhodes, were going up and doing these like northern community tours. Do you remember this? They were getting a lot of people on record, like Indigenous and First Nations people that were saying like, we're proud of the name, we don't have a problem with the name. And it was sort of being litigated in the public. And I think at the end of it, the impression that I took away from it was that it was just bad business for the then Eskimos. And at that point, they were going to have to change their name because this was going to be something that was never going to go away. The controversy was never going to go away. And it was always going to be a distraction. And one way to move on from that is to rebrand and move on. Like the NBA, like nobody thinks about the Washington Bullets anymore. Nobody thinks about that anymore. It's not a thing anymore. This kind of stirs it up again and kicks it up again. And you wonder if they were going to do it, how they'd roll it out and what the response might be, maybe landing with a thud. Vamp Fashion says the team did so much work linking with the people up north, like I was just talking about, says, bringing kids down, setting up equipment, teaching the game. And he said it's so sad that a couple of professional whiners killed decades of pride. As well as I do, there's a lot of people that still proudly wear the Eskimos branding and stuff like that at games, and I think they'd be happy to see him come back. I'll also say that, let's say, and I'm making the number up, I didn't see what the attendance was last game. I mean, I want to see the team succeed. I want to see the team do great. Yeah. I'd be happy to see it. I think it's a good product. I think the players do amazing. I think that there are people working in the organization doing a really good job, Johnny, yourself included. But let's say you're drawing 8,000 to 10,000 people, and let's say you change the name back, and then you're still drawing 8,000 to 10,000 people.
Well, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Then what? Right?
I'm not talking for the Elks now because I want to be done talking for them because I love them and I work for them.
Let's be clear, you're not speaking on their behalf.
I'm just talking for anyone who owns a sports organization, runs a sports organization, a GM, a CEO. Is your goal to bring back fans from 30 years ago, or is it to acquire new, younger fans all the time?
Great point.
It's always B. And this would not do B, and that's why it won't happen.
That's a great point. Jordan in the chat says the Chicago Blackhawks have the best jersey out there. That's an interesting study. The Chicago Blackhawks and their ownership group, the family that's owned the Blackhawks, the Wirtz family,
have a great
for
jersey.
years and years.
Replace it with an Eagles head.
Oh, but there's sure you could.
Be the same jersey.
But it's one of the most iconic jerseys in sports, and they're just an interesting, almost a standalone franchise in that they've gone on the record and just said, we're never changing the name, so quit asking. Like they've just gone on the record and said that, the Chicago Blackhawks. So we get this email, this from Patrick. This is amazing, to talk at ryanjespersen.com. Johnny and I, as you may know, we opened Friday before we got into Adler, mentioning that you and I had been at Punk and Drublic and had checked out NOFX in their final tour stop in Edmonton.
Yeah, amazing.
How cool is this guy, John Hicks? That was your Christmas gift to me, tickets to go see this event together. I was super excited. Well, Patrick was even more excited. Patrick was stoked to hear us talking about the NOFX show, and I just wanted to read this. Most times we read emails, we like to read emails that are critical of us. I think it's more fun for the audience to hear, but every once in a while we'll read somebody pumping our tires, and this one really made us smile. He says, I've been an avid listener of Real Talk since day one. Patrick says, I'm one of those weirdos who listens to your podcast at night while working out, and I never miss an episode. He says, over the years, I've been prompted to write in at least 50 times, but I decided not to or never found the time, even when the subject matter really mattered to me. Well, today is the day. He says, I spent my entire weekend at Ice District for Punk in Drublic. I sold things that were dear to me in order to get to afford a bro pass for Sunday. These are these passes you were telling me about, Johnny. These were like, there was something like $1,000 or something like this.
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube here, basically you get to stand at you get
side stage.
You get some beers, you get to stand side stage the whole time, and you get a 20 minutes hanging out after,
with the band.
which to Fat Mike is probably like an hour and a half. He's not going to time, right?
Yeah. So this
guys,
this is where Patrick is. So this is the context for his experience here. He says the past allowed me to hang out with my favorite band of all time, NOFX, and be backstage during their set. My wife and I, with many friends, just couldn't miss this last chance to see them live. Sunday was just unreal to me. I got to meet the band. He goes, I met Smelly, and he was great. We got along right away. We're both left-handed guys who play the drums right, and we like to make stupid jokes. And then Melvin was next, and things were so cool with him. And then Hefe showed up and made a few jokes before fading away. And finally, Mike showed up, says Patrick. He says, I got next to him, and then I was struck with it. The worst disease ever. Groupiomutism. Patrick got groupiomutism. He says, I couldn't say a fucking thing. I tried so hard, but whatever came out of my mouth made no sense. Mike made me who I am. From learning English at 13, he says, I'm Quebecois, who sang Champs-Élysées very loudly, to becoming politicized, becoming socially progressive, becoming open-minded yet opinionated. And I missed a golden opportunity to say all of that to my hero. It says, Jespo, why am I telling you all this? He says, well, this weekend, as I got out of Ice District, there was a great vibe downtown. And it was my first time in my 18 years in Edmonton taking part in like multiple events, parties, bar nights, concerts. I was proud to be walking downtown. And I know your studio's there. I walked past it. And I thought of you guys. And I know that you want this city to become the best it can. And you do whatever you can for it to be better every day. And when I heard on Monday morning you and Johnny talking about being at Punk and Drublic on Sunday, and I saw the Real Talk logo in the Rad Dad's coloring book, that's one we're proud to support, he says, I knew I had to tell you. So here it is, without the stupid groupiomutism getting in the way. He says, thanks a million times to Real Talk for doing what you guys do and helping us become better people. He said, I've always been avid as a consumer of talk radio, and your show, in my opinion, here, permit us to say this, guys. This is, Pat's email. He says to us, is the best one in Canada. He says, at least in the English language. He says, keep it as it is for as long as you can. As a social studies teacher, he says, by the way, I've worked on the previous social studies programs, and I've got a pretty crunchy story about my work there. Pat will follow up on that. He says, I appreciate all that I hear on this show, and I'll sometimes use it to help my students understand various perspectives. He says, I don't know if I could have got that all out in front of you if I ran into you at an Oilers game. I love you and Johnny, and I hope we'll get to crush one together eventually. He says, now enough with the free shit. Time to subscribe to Patreon. Peace, love, and unity from Pat. How cool is that, dude?
Thanks, Pat.
Wasn't that awesome?
Yeah, it was amazing.
I really appreciate that.
That was awesome.
We talked to the strategists on August 2nd, and this was some interesting follow-up. Corey Hogan, Stephen Carter, Zane Velji join us a couple of times a year, co-hosts of a very popular political podcast as well, and good friends of the show. And they like to take swipes at us. They like to take swipes that we sell sponsorship. They like to take swipes at the fact that I'm open-minded on things like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Yeah. And we had some fun during the interview as they asked. We were talking about Pierre Poilievre and Bitcoin. And they implied, check out the episode if you missed it because it was wildly entertaining. It's August 2nd. They implied that Pierre Poilievre had to eat some crow on Bitcoin. And I kind of pushed back. And I said, well, I don't really know how Poilievre was wrong on Bitcoin. Nothing that he said was grossly wrong. Time has not proven him to be wrong. And some of you wrote in and said, well, he called it inflation-proof or recession-proof, and that's not true. And you're right, it's not technically true. But here's the deal. So I went on the record, off the top of my head, by the way, and I said in that episode, you remember, I said, I've never told anybody to buy Bitcoin, and don't ever take financial advice from me. But had you bought Bitcoin around the time that we were talking about it and sponsored by a company that sells Bitcoin on the show, that you'd be up like 30%. And there's not a lot of returns, other investment returns, that would have delivered that ROI. And Corey, after the episode, he crunched the numbers and he followed up. And I thought that this would be interesting for the audience to know. So shout out to Corey Hogan, one of the strategists. He said, so he crunched the numbers. And he went back to March 28th of 2022, which is one of the times that we were talking to the strategists. And he said at that time, a Bitcoin was worth about 47,000 Canadian, $47,100. The S&P at that time, the S&P 500 was trading at $4,500.41. Okay, so 45.41. Okay, so there's your context. Today, Bitcoin is worth about 63,286. That would be in USD. Pardon me. He says, so that's a gain of about 34%. The S&P 500 today, or when he sent this to us on August 2nd, the S&P 500 is worth about 5,300 and change, 5,328. That's up about 17%. So you could look at this and say from March 2022 till now, Bitcoin has doubled the return of the S&P 500. But, Corey says, you got to keep in mind that stocks provide dividends. And once that's taken into account, if your dividends are reinvested, in other words, if you're not pulling them out, if you're reinvesting your dividends back into the S&P 500, look at this, Johnny. It's a horse race. This is like the Paris Olympic men's 100-meter final. This is almost a photo finish. From March of 2022 till now, Bitcoin has provided approximately, or has gleaned a 34% return. The S&P 500 with reinvested dividends up 31%, just 3% back. I thought that was pretty interesting stuff. And then Corey wraps this up by saying, pretty close. He says, but I'll take the one with lower volatility any day.
Oh,
of course, that would be the S&P 500.
Also, this is just one window. Like, let's take a window from when Bitcoin was doing horribly.
When it was $200.
Yeah, this is when it was doing good. But I agree. Like, the S&P looks like it's the safer bet.
I always want to like when we have.
But
an
I did say
opportunity
yesterday, it's fun to be a cowboy.
Oh, it is fun to be a cowboy.
It's
Yeah,
fun
for
to
sure.
roll the dice.
It's just not fun to lose everything. But you know, we appreciate opportunities like this, and we know that you as an audience expect some follow up, and this is stuff that just like deepens our understanding. Now you've got some numbers, you got some a general premise to put in front of people next time folks are talking about it. So I thought that was neat, and I wanted to wrap today with this from Fiona, who has a challenge for you. You may remember on that same episode. Now this is a very good and positive challenge.
Oh,
you remember on that same episode we were talking about Lego. You remember I was talking about how like they have got all different kinds of amazing Lego now, including the Lego flower bouquets. I don't know if you guys have seen this. I was looking at, you can get Lego bonsai trees, like absolutely amazing. And we were talking about this, and you were chuckling, and I don't mean to, I'm not putting you in a tough spot. I don't want to misrepresent you, but I was saying, I wonder if Johnny and I could get away with, giving the loves of our life Lego bouquets instead of flower bouquets.
Oh,
and
I
of
do
course,
remember
right?
this.
You remember
now.
this?
Yeah,
You remember this? So
course.
Fiona writes in, and she says, first of all, your August 2nd episode, Friday, August 2nd, was absolutely awesome and very engaging. This was Miss Universe Canada, Ashley Collingbull, Immigration Minister Mark Miller, and the strategist. It was a super episode. She says, but I'm writing in to just simply say, Lego is amazing. And it's not just for kids. She says, the part about the flower bouquets you guys were talking about in the episode, she says, I've been married for more than 10 years. I've been together with my spouse for 15. We've got 3 young kids. Flower bouquets are pretty for like a week, like real life ones, and then they die. Lego flower bouquets are eternal, and you get the fun to build them together with your spouse or alone. Fiona says, now I'm a perfectionist, so there's like no way that my hubby is touching my Lego. She says, Lego has taught us, me and my kids, to slow things down and create, which everybody needs. You can always find the time to create. She says, and Johnny said that he doesn't have time as an adult. She says, now I'm a mom. She goes, I'm working part-time. I'm raising 3 young kids. I have a dog. She says, there's always time. It's just what you appoint. It's what you deem to be more important. It's what you cut time away from, like screens. Stop scrolling and create. So Johnny, says Fiona, buy the damn Lego, and Jespo, get Carrie a Lego flower bouquet today. And she says, for your reference, and if you're watching on YouTube, we're showing some of these, Johnny's showing us. She says, I've attached a few Lego sets the kids and I have built together. She says, I couldn't load all the photos because there's just too many of them. She says, we love the Japanese Lego sets from TNT, Amazon. They're 3/4 the size of regular Lego, which makes it hard to build, but there's much more detail. She says, I would attach the Harry Potter castle with all the decor. Until next time. That from Fiona. So there you go. She's given us the green light to create and to go with the Lego flower bouquets. I like the idea.
Well, my partner's going to be very happy.
Yeah.
Come Christmas, she's going to open a...
I thought this, if we go with
Put together your own bouquet.
Yeah, but
to
you
Tinder.
do it together.
No, I'm just kidding.
You know, you make her a chamomile tea. You guys hang out together and you put the bouquet together. I was thinking, for me, it was the Lego bonsai tree that caught my attention.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
This is not sponsored by Lego, by the way, although we will send them this segment and see if we can get free Lego. But I thought that's the one thing, the one plant in this studio that I would have no chance of killing.
Yeah.
You know, if we were to go with the Lego bonsai tree.
And I do need to make more time for things. I feel like every time I have, thanks for calling me to the carpet on that, because every time I have free time, I get like an hour's sleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's good
I take
too.
a nap.
That's good too.
But
You know what? There's been a real resurgence in
maybe it's
adults
because I don't
and
have kids.
coloring
But like
books.
you, if you have an hour, you hang out with Wyatt or whatever. You don't have time for a nap, right?
Well, or have a nap with your kid.
Yeah,
Right?
there you go.
Justin says the Lego story is fascinating. They almost went bankrupt. I had no idea. But you know what? Like just the other day, unrelated to this, but Wyatt we give him some allocated screen time, and he was watching the Lego movie. And I was just thinking about as I was watching this. I know a million people have said this already, but I'm going, isn't this incredible? Like brand placement. Like everybody always wanted to be able to get like the in the movie they're like smoking that pack of cigarettes or they're drinking that can of Coke or like there's the brand placement. This is just a whole movie franchise about a product that people can buy. It's just incredible marketing. But Justin, I'll obviously have to level up my knowledge on the Lego story. I didn't know. Thanks to those of you that do take the time to send us the emails. We try to set aside blocks in shows like this, no pun intended, where we get to as many as we can and try to respond to even more personally. Talk at ryanjespersen.com is where you can let us know how the show is landing with you, and like Luke in Diamond Valley, let us know about guests that you'd love to see on the show. Coming up on our Thursday episode, we're going to talk to probably one of the most decorated and well-known architects in Canada. Vivian Manask is going to join me in studio. The Alberta government is getting set to knock down the old Royal Alberta Museum, and people are losing their damn minds. So we're going to get to that story. We'll talk about alternative solutions, and then a special Olympic-themed Friday roundtable coming up with journalists and photographers that were there.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk